Hello, dear listeners, and welcome back to the latest episode, episode 5 of Film Filter. And I am your host, Edgar Chaput. No. Edgar Chaput. I enjoy how these Film Filter episodes are evolving so far on a week-to-week basis. I don't really know what I'll discuss, whether it'll be a new film that's just released in theaters or streaming or something old. And today I want to talk a little bit about the films of Michelangelo Antonioni. And as one might surmise, that is not what I planned to discuss earlier this week. In fact, I did not know as of about a week ago that I would go through a little Antonioni binge. How did this happen? How did I spend the last week watching L'Avventura, La Notte, and L'Eclisse? L'Eclisse in French would be L'Eclisse. In English, it seems the title is The Eclipse. That's the one of the three where I'm really not sure which title I'm supposed to use. How did this happen? Well, at the time of recording, we're well into the third week of September here. The great French actor Alain Delon passed away about a month ago. I think he passed away in August. It might have been late July, but I think it was August. And I did watch one of his movies, Purple Moon, Plein Soleil, if you will. And I kind of left it at that. Very good movie. I liked it a lot. Alain Delon was a very interesting actor. Handsome devil. But I kind of left it at that for a couple of weeks. And then about a week ago, I don't remember what evening it was, I was sort of sifting through my streaming services and I did a search for Alain Delon. I thought, how about I saw Plein Soleil, how about another one? And then I noticed that he had made a film with Michelangelo Antonioni, L'Eclisse, with Monica Vitti, which I had never seen. The only two Antonioni films, to the best of my knowledge, that I had seen at that point in time was L'Avventura and Blow Up. Blow Up being the actual title. It's an English language film. In fact, I had seen Blow Up earlier this year, either earlier this year or in 2023. It's a fairly recent watch. But I'd never seen L'Eclisse. And by way of trying to catch up with Alain Delon's filmography, well, much like after I watched Plein Soleil, the catch-up for Delon has stalled because then I went on this little Antonioni trip. His Ennui trilogy, his trilogy on modernity, on harsh feelings in the modern world, in changing societies, shifting mores, societal expectations, architecture, love, feelings, confusion, everything. This trilogy, as it were, of L'Avventura, La Notte, which means the night, obviously, L'Avventura, the adventure, concluding with L'Eclisse. Some of the actors return in each film. Monica Vitti stars in two and is a strong supporting actress in one of them. Others like Alain Delon is only in L'Eclisse, Gabriele Ferzetti is only in L'Avventura, Jeanne Moreau is only in La Notte. So it's not always the same cast, although it feels safe to say that Monica Vitti is Antonioni's muse, if you will. In fact, she actually does another film with Antonioni called Red Desert, which I have not seen. I do have access to it via the Criterion channel. By the way, that is how I watched all these movies, the Criterion channel. I had not seen L'Eclisse, I had not seen La Notte, and I had not seen L'Avventura in quite some time. And I didn't even watch them. I didn't even watch them in order. About a week ago, I saw L'Eclisse. Then I went back to watch, which concludes the trilogy. Then I went back to watch L'Avventura, which opens the trilogy. And last night, I enjoyed La Notte, which is the middle chapter. it's a thematic trilogy. It's not a plot trilogy. Monica Vitti, I said she stars in 2 and has a strong supporting role in 1. To be clear, by way of playing 3 completely different characters. It's a loose trilogy. It's a thematic trilogy. It's an emotional trilogy. You're not coming in cold and confused if you watch L'Eclisse like I did without having seen L'Avventura or La Notte. You don't have to watch them in order. Although, maybe one can argue that they are a trilogy with a chronological order insofar as how increasingly complex the emotions of the characters and the murkiness of the interpersonal relationships get. The relationships and the love lives are murky in all 3, to be clear. But I would argue that maybe L'Eclisse is the one that is the murkiest, the one that is the most not troubled, because I think that would actually be L'Avventura. La Notte seems to be the cleanest one of the 3. There's some stuff going on there in La Notte, but maybe it's the cleanest. Whereas L'Eclisse, I think what struck me the most about L'Eclisse was how it spoke to how the Monica Vitti character, and it's interesting that she is Michelangelo Antonioni's muse in his filmography and in this trilogy. The Monica Vitti character in L'Eclisse, named Vittoria, the film opens and she's actually canceling a relationship. She's ending a relationship. It opens in an apartment in a Roman suburb, modern day, circa the early 1960s. Modern day Rome suburb. She ends a relationship. The gentleman is not interested in ending the relationship, not in any sort of mean-spirited way. He is more complacent than maybe what you would expect, an angry male, heartbroken character to be. He doesn't. It's not that type of a character. Although the breakup is not amicable per se, hence the murkiness of the emotions and the complexity of the interpersonal relationships. The point I'm trying to drive at is that throughout L'Eclisse, the Vittoria character eventually, takes a little bit of time, but eventually crosses paths with Alain Delon's character, Piero. And Piero works in Rome, downtown Rome, at the stock exchange. He's a stock broker, if you will. He's one of those guys that's yelling at the top of their lungs for 8 hours a day until the bell rings to sound, to indicate the day of trading stocks is over. And Piero is... we don't get to know Piero as well as we do Vittoria. And even then, it's a little bit difficult to pinpoint exactly who Vittoria is, which, I reckon, is kind of the point of the film and kind of the point of the trilogy. This disillusionment with relationships, this constant tug of war between wanting to be with someone. We are, after all, social creatures. We as humans appreciate examples, gestures of love, of friendship, of partnership, whether they're told to us, whether someone does something for us, whether we are touched by a lover or a family member. We like those things. And beyond that, we know it in our hearts what it feels like to be loved, whether it is friendship or family or romantic partner, long-term, short-term, forgive me. We need these things. We recognize that we want these things. We recognize that by the way that the stars have created us, that is what makes us happiest. At the same time, in stark contrast, there are some of us that don't necessarily fit into the perfect box. There are some of us who wrestle with those emotions. There is a constant tug of war between the innate appreciation and desire for human love, as well as a frustration, lack of interest, on and off disinterest in engaging in the complexities of a relationship. We want one, we want a partner, we'd like to have a partner, and when we have one, we suddenly see their imperfections, which in many respects reveal our own imperfections. And it's interesting to see the Vittoria character go through that. Not that the Piero character is a perfect gentleman. If, like I said, we never get to know Piero as well as Vittoria. If anything, he's a man of action. He works at the Roma Stock Exchange. I think he's in it for quick fun. Certainly more so than Vittoria, who's in a much more of an existential crisis. And it was interesting because I feel as though I want to be very careful how I express this. I think I could relate to Vittoria without getting into my personal life and my innermost thoughts and feelings. There was something about her character in L'Eclisse that I did relate to. I think whether we want to admit it or not, and this is also an interesting crux of this trilogy of films, but whether we want to admit it or not, my gut tells me, and maybe I'm wrong, but my gut tells me that at some point in our lives, whether it's for a long stretch of time or a very brief episode, an episode that could maybe only last a year or half a year or just a few months, but at some point in all of our lives, we do feel that, what do I want? I want to be with people, but I also don't want to be with people. I want to be with people, not necessarily the people I'm with right now. I think our flaws as humans tend to show themselves in our indecisiveness, in our contradictions, in our simultaneous desires but also repulsions. And the Vittoria character and what the film does with her, what Antonioni and Monica Vitti create in L'Eclisse is something quite potent. It's a very slow burn. I mean, L'Eclisse is not a traditional romance film, let me put it that way. But it is quite interesting, and it's a beautifully shot film. In fact, the gentleman who shot L'Eclisse, Gianni Di Venanzo, also shot La Notte, which is funny because I watched La Notte last night, and for a few minutes, the opening minutes, I was under the impression that it might be the least pleasing to the eyes of the three. Again, I watched them out of order, and La Notte ended up being the last one I watched, even though it's technically the middle chapter. But that was quick. At the time, I hadn't looked up the cinematographer's name. I didn't know it was, number one, I didn't know it was Gianni Di Venanzo. And secondly, I didn't know Di Venanzo had shot any movies. I did not know who this person was until I started preparing this episode. But La Notte is also quite beautiful. And Monica Vitti is in that one too. She's more the temptress. La Notte, the stars of that one are actually Marcello Mastroianni and Jean Moreau. If Marcello Mastroianni is a name familiar to some of these listeners, it might be more thanks to some Federico Fellini films like La Dolce Vita and 8½. Although, as lo and behold, much to my pleasant surprise, he obviously worked with Antonioni as well, with La Notte. And Mastroianni plays Giovanni, an author, a celebrated author, and Jeanne Moreau is Lydia, his wife. And La Notte is maybe that when I said earlier that La Notte is maybe more the cleanest of the three, I meant that primarily in the sense that first of all, they are married, which is maybe a little bit harder to break up with. It's never really clear in L'Eclisse what the nature of the relationship between Vittoria and the gentleman at the start of that movie, although in La Notte it is quite clear that Giovanni and Lydia are wed. They've been wed for a few years. They're not exactly young people, but they've been wed for a few years. And there is an ennui about their lifestyle too. Antonioni definitely likes his female leads because Lydia has more screen time than Giovanni. We see Lydia, she at the start of the movie, she's quite distraught because an old friend of hers is in the hospital with a terminal illness, and she can't really take it anymore, so she leaves the hospital, and she kind of just walks around the city for a while. She just wanders and goes off and observes people on the street. She observes people in the suburbs. She comes across these young men, presumably students, who are launching rockets, sort of science fair type rockets into the sky. She comes across another band of male youths who are fighting. She actually intervenes at one point in the fight when it gets a little bit too violent. She's literally just wandering. I mean, we come to learn at the end of the film that she wants to divorce Giovanni, and this is at the conclusion of a very, very long party that goes on all night in a lavish Milan home with dozens upon dozens of guests. Everybody's beautiful, everybody's well dressed, and this party goes on all night. I guess hence the title La Notte, the night. And the next morning, Lydia finally confesses that she wants a divorce and she just doesn't love Giovanni as much as she used to. But their relationship doesn't seem to really crash and burn as one might expect in sort of a more obvious, dramatic way. It's more subdued. Again, it's more complicated. And then there is maybe my favorite of the trilogy, interestingly enough, the first one of the three, L'Avventura, which at the start, it's funny how Antonioni uses Monica Vitti. At the start of L'Avventura, it's not really clear if Monica Vitti's character, Claudia, is going to be the protagonist. It kind of feels like it actually might be Gabriele Ferzetti's Sandro and Lea Massari's Anna, because they're in a relationship at the start of the film. Claudia is just is a good friend of Anna's. They have a very good relationship, and Claudia doesn't really know Sandro. I think she actually might be meeting him for the first time when the film starts. And they and a group of other people take a small boat in the the Tyrrhenian Sea, more specifically, and they basically have fun, if you will, around the Aeolian Islands. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. The Aeolian Islands and the Tyrrhenian Sea, not far off the coast of Sicily. And they stop on this one island. The islands, these are basically rocks, really. But they stop on one of these islands for an indeterminate amount of time, but one assumes a couple of hours. They even take a nap, a siesta in the afternoon. And Anna, the Lea Massari character, Anna disappears. Did she fall off a cliff and drown? Did she escape on a boat? It's not really clear. And ironically enough, just before she disappears and just before Sandro, the Ferzetti character, takes a nap, their relationship starts to break down. Actually, Anna seems to have been feeling it for a little while, to be honest with you. Sandro is maybe a little bit more of a traditional man. He's not particularly interested in breaking up with his lady friend. He goes off for a snooze to catch some Z's, and Anna just disappears. And the rest of the film is mostly Sandro and Claudia trying to find understand what happened to Anna. There are reports and rumors that people who, because her disappearance is reported to the police, people who might have resemble, who adhere to her physical description, have been reportedly seen in various locations in various cities. So L'Avventura, the adventure, is Claudia and Sandro trying to put the piece... Well, I was about to say the adventure is them putting the pieces of the puzzle about Anna's disappearance together, but that's not really true. The adventure is, once again, complex relationships. Sandro doesn't come off as a particularly nice person. He's not evil, but at the start of the movie he's with Anna. Then shortly after the search for Anna begins, he tries to get with Claudia. Eventually Claudia sort of relents, because again, as a human, as a social creature, she does appreciate physical affection and the veneration that a man can offer a woman. But she's obviously confused about it as well, because she's lost a friend. She's not really clear as to how Sandra could try to hook up with her so quickly, because he just lost a lover, presumably lost. We never find out what happened to Anna. That's kind of the point. What happened to Anna is not important. What is important is, how do two people who only just met that need affection, and they both lost someone close to them, in one case a friend, and in another case a lover, and those two people become lovers. It's a really, really, it's a very strange movie, but again, it's kind of one of it. The ideas of the trilogy start to take shape in this first one, L'Avventura, where how are people supposed to behave in our modern society? What are the social standards, the norms? What is the public perception of a pair of lovers? What is the public perception of a new pair of lovers when a previous pair broke up? It's all quite interesting. If I'm struggling a little bit to put my ideas into words, it's maybe because the trilogy is very fresh and I've only been thinking about it as a trilogy for literally a few hours, but I felt compelled to share some thoughts. I do think there's something interesting about these three movies, and I do think that, maybe to cap off this conversation, they are just as relevant today in September of 2024 as they were in the early 60s when they were released. In fact, all three of these movies were released about a year apart. L'Avventura is 1960, La Notte is 61, and L'Eclisse is 62. They're celebrated movies. The art house crowd loves these films. If Star Wars and Batman is your jam, maybe don't watch this, unless you are open to it and you do want something different. But otherwise, maybe this is not your jam. But I get it. I understand why these films are still quoted, why these films are still celebrated. Even though the quote modernity and the mores associated with modernity in the universe of these films is circa Italy in the early 60s, I, as a non-Italian, watching these movies in Canada in 2024, over 60 years later, across the Atlantic Ocean, I still got it, or at least I understood it in my own particular way. Film and the appreciation of art is subjective after all. But in my own personal idiosyncratic way, I still feel like I got it. I got enough out of these films, all three of them, even though L'Avventura is probably my favorite, they still spoke to me. I still saw myself. I want to be very careful how I say this because I don't want like listeners to get like weird ideas, but I still saw in some respects, to a degree, I still saw myself in the Monica Vitti character. Maybe not her character in La Notte, but in her characters in L'Avventura and L'Eclisse. L'Eclisse, by the way, which has one of the wildest endings ever. If you know, you know. Art house wild, okay? Not like Bong Joon-ho wild. Art house wild. Great film trilogy. It's a very specific trilogy. This is not for everyone, but look, this show's been going on for about 25 minutes at the time of recording. If you're still listening, it's probably because you've seen these, whether recently or in the distant past, and you have some kind of affection towards them. And I think that's what surprised me the most. I'll conclude with this. For films that are to an extent a bit distant, to an extent a bit cold, and very thematic and exploratory in their nature, I hold affection for them. Not necessarily warm, fuzzy feelings. They are not, after all, warm, fuzzy films. But I do have a place in my heart for them. There you have it. That was another episode of Film Filter, episode 5. I hope you enjoyed it. Sorry for spoiling his Michelangelo Antonioni's Modernity, Disillusionment, Ennui trilogy. But, these are over 60 years old. And this episode's been going on for a while. I'm assuming you've seen these films. They are available on the Criterion channel to stream. There are, of course, DVDs and Blu-rays for these films as well. I hope you enjoyed the episode. I hope it wasn't too boring. And whether you got the same things I got out of this trilogy of films or not, it doesn't really matter. I think these are just interesting films to talk about. And I like reading other people's thoughts about these movies. Maybe not the haughty-taughty ivory tower dissertations necessarily, but just what people feel about it. These three films in particular, what do people feel when they watch them? I think it's a fascinating exercise for a fascinating trilogy. So on that note, thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you very shortly on the next episode. Ciao, guys.